Right now, somewhere in America, a Texas housewife from the 1960s is still changing the way people think about luck. Her name was Helen Hadsell, and she won 5,000 contests. 5,000. Not one, not 10, but 5,000 consecutive wins across decades. Trips to Europe, a house that was displayed at the 1964 World's Fair, boats, appliances, experiences that most people only dream about in their most hopeful moments. And when everyone asked her the same question, "How are you so lucky?" she gave them an answer that completely contradicted everything they believed about chance, fortune, and destiny. She said she wasn't lucky at all. She had a system. Think about what that means for a moment. There is no magic involved here, no destiny controlling the outcome, no cosmic force deciding who deserves good fortune and who doesn't. She had a repeatable method. 4 simple steps that she could teach, that could be learned, that could be practiced like any other skill. And here's where it gets interesting. Scientists later proved she was absolutely right. A professor named Richard Wiseman spent 10 years studying luck, running hundreds of experiments. And what he discovered was astonishing. Lucky people aren't born that way. They don't attract fortune through mystical energy or positive thinking alone. They simply notice opportunities that other people completely miss. And the reason they miss them has nothing to do with fate. It has everything to do with how their brain is wired under stress. You've probably experienced this yourself. You're anxious about something, overwhelmed by work or family obligations, and someone mentions an opportunity right in front of you. But your mind doesn't register it. It can't. Your brain is too busy scanning for threats, too focused on everything that could go wrong, too contracted by worry to see what's actually available. And then weeks later, you find out someone else took that opportunity, someone who was calm enough to notice it, someone who seemed to have all the luck. The truth is, that person wasn't luckier than you. They were just in a different internal state. They had trained their attention. They had learned to trust their instincts. They had built a system, either consciously or unconsciously, for recognizing and acting on the chances that life constantly offers to everyone. This book is about that system, not about manifesting or cosmic ordering or any of that. This is about practical, trainable, repeatable skills that will teach your brain to notice opportunities you're currently walking past, to trust the intuition you're currently ignoring, and to act with confidence when you're currently paralyzed by overthinking. By the time you finish listening, you will understand exactly why some people seem to stumble into good fortune, while others spend their lives wondering why nothing ever works out. And more importantly, you will have the tools to become someone luck actually follows. But here's the thing. Luck doesn't follow you. You have to become the kind of person who recognizes it when it appears. In the chapters ahead, we're going to walk through 3 levels of skill. Level 1 teaches you how to notice, really notice, the opportunities that are already around you, but that your stressed, contracted brain is filtering out. Level 2 shows you how to create your own opportunities, how to expand your circle, how to become someone worth getting lucky for. And level 3 is where everything integrates, where you stop waiting for luck and start becoming someone who generates it naturally, almost effortlessly, as a side effect of who you've become. You're going to hear stories about real people who transformed their lives once they understood this. You'll learn the science behind why your brain blocks chances when you're in survival mode. And most importantly, you're going to get concrete practices, starting today, that will immediately shift how you move through the world. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Because luck isn't something you find, it's something you build. And the building starts right now. Your best years aren't behind you. They're not dependent on what happened to you in the past or what you missed 5 years ago. Your best years are ahead of you, waiting for you to become the kind of person who can recognize them when they arrive. And that person, the lucky one, the successful one, the one things seem to work out for, that person is already inside you. We're just going to train them to come out. So let's begin. Chapter 1. The Myth. Luck is destiny. There's a moment that happens in almost every person's life when they realize that luck isn't random at all. It's actually a skill that can be trained. For Helen Hadsell, that moment came when she decided to participate in her first contest. She didn't win that one, or the next 10. But she kept entering, and somewhere along the way, something shifted. Within a few years, she wasn't just winning contests. She was winning everything she entered, 5,000 times. And when people asked her what her secret was, she didn't talk about good fortune or cosmic alignment. She talked about attention. She talked about noticing what others missed. And that's the key insight that changes everything about how you understand luck. The reason Helen's story matters so much right now is because it proves something that most people spend their entire lives doubting. Luck isn't a fixed trait. You don't either have it or you don't, like height or eye color. Luck is a collection of habits, perspectives, and skills that can be learned, practiced, and refined. And once you understand that, really understand it in your bones, you stop waiting for good fortune to arrive, and you start building the internal conditions that attract it. Let's go back to Professor Richard Wiseman's experiment, because this is where science confirms what Helen already knew. Wiseman gathered hundreds of people, some who considered themselves lucky, others who felt like nothing ever worked out for them. He gave them all the same task: count the photographs in a newspaper. Simple, straightforward, the kind of thing anyone can do in a few minutes. But here's what made the experiment brilliant. On the second page of that newspaper, in large letters, there was a message that said, "Stop counting. There are 43 photographs here. If you notice this, tell the researcher and win £250. 250 pounds is real money. It's significant. It's the kind of thing that would genuinely change someone's day. The results were stunning. Almost every person who considered themselves lucky noticed that message immediately, within the first few seconds of looking at the newspaper. The people who felt unlucky, they never saw it. They were so focused on counting photographs, so concentrated on the task they'd been given, that their brain literally filtered out the large printed message that was sitting right in front of their eyes. They looked directly at it and didn't register that it existed. This is the most important moment in this experiment. Not that the lucky people won the money. They won because they were paying attention in a fundamentally different way. Their brain was open. It was flexible. It was scanning for unexpected things, not just executing the task they'd been assigned. Think about what that means for your life right now. Luck wasn't about probability or chance or the universe deciding to smile on certain people. Luck was about attention. It was about what your brain was trained to notice and what it was filtering out. And here's the part that matters most to you. Your brain is doing the same thing every single day. You're walking past opportunities that someone else would immediately grab. You're sitting in conversations where the exact connection you need is being mentioned. And you're not hearing it because you're worried about something else. You're scrolling past messages and emails that contain doors to your next chapter. But your mind is somewhere else. Somewhere worried. Somewhere stressed. Somewhere contracted. This happens constantly in the working world. A colleague mentions they know someone in a field you've been wanting to break into. You hear the words, but they don't register because you're stressed about a deadline. A potential client visits your business, and there's a small detail they mention about their needs that would be perfect for you to address. But you're thinking about 3 other things, so you miss it. Years later, you find out that client went to someone else, and you think, if only I'd known. But you did know. You were there. Your brain just didn't flag it as important because you were in survival mode, in threat detection mode, in a state of contraction. The people who seem to always get lucky aren't special. They're not blessed. They're not born with some kind of fortune gene that the rest of us lack. They've simply trained their attention to work differently. They notice what's available instead of what's missing. They see doors instead of walls. And the most important part, the part that changes everything, is that this is a skill. This means you can learn it. This means that the luck you've been waiting for isn't coming from outside you. It's coming from inside you. It's coming from rewiring how your brain processes the world. But here's where most people get stuck. They hear this information. They nod along. They think, yes, this makes sense. And then nothing changes, because they're still operating in the same internal state that got them stuck in the first place. If you're anxious, if you're in chronic stress, if you're living with fear and tension in your body, your brain will continue to filter the world the same way it always has. It will keep you focused on threats instead of opportunities. It will keep you noticing what could go wrong instead of what could go right. You can't think your way out of this. You can't logic your way to luck. You have to change your internal state first, and then your attention will naturally shift. This is why Helen Hadsell's system worked so brilliantly, and this is why we're going to spend the next chapters breaking it down. She understood something that most people never figure out. Luck follows the people who are relaxed enough to notice it, confident enough to pursue it, and committed enough to act on it before the moment passes. And every single one of those qualities is trainable. Every one of them is a skill. The fact that you're listening to this right now means you're already halfway there, because you're willing to consider that maybe, just maybe, luck has nothing to do with destiny and everything to do with how you're showing up in the world. Here's your first practice, and I want you to do this today. This isn't something you need to commit to for 30 days or completely restructure your life around. Just today. Just for the next few hours. I want you to notice 3 things that you would normally miss. They don't have to be big or dramatic. They could be something someone says in conversation that might be useful to you later. They could be a pattern you suddenly see in your work or your relationships that you've never paid attention to before. They could be a resource that's available to you that you never noticed because you were too focused on what wasn't working. The point is to wake up your noticing muscles. Right now, your brain is probably set to threat detection mode, scanning for what's wrong, what's missing, what could hurt you. We're going to gently retrain it to also notice what's right, what's available, what could help you move forward. Pay attention to how it feels different when you're looking for opportunities instead of problems. Notice the shift in your body when you catch yourself about to miss something and you actually pause and look closer instead. This is the beginning. This is how you start to become the kind of person that luck follows. And I want you to notice something specific. That this simple shift in attention doesn't require permission from anyone. It doesn't require money or connections or credentials. It just requires you to choose, right now, to look differently at the world around you. But knowing this isn't enough. Knowing that luck is a skill won't change your life by itself. Because there's something else standing between you and the opportunities that are already surrounding you. Something in your nervous system. something in how you've learned to respond to the world, something that makes you miss what's right in front of you even when you know better. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about exactly what that is and how to shift it. Because luck doesn't just require attention, it requires a very specific kind of attention that comes from a very specific internal state. And once you understand what that state is, everything changes. So keep listening. Chapter 2. The myth. You have to wait for your moment. There's something deeply human about waiting. We're taught from childhood that good things come to those who wait, that patience is a virtue, that your moment will arrive when the universe decides it's time. This belief runs so deep that most people spend decades in a kind of suspended animation, staying in jobs they don't love, remaining in situations that don't serve them, postponing the life they actually want. All while telling themselves that eventually, somehow, their luck will turn. But what if I told you that waiting is actually one of the biggest obstacles standing between you and the opportunities that are already trying to find you right now? Think back to Wiseman's experiment for a moment. But look at it from a different angle. The people who missed the message about the 250 pounds weren't just less observant than the lucky people. They were in a completely different internal state. They were contracted. They were focused. They were locked into a specific task with a specific goal. And their nervous system was essentially saying, only this matters right now. Everything else is a distraction. This state of contraction isn't something that only happens during formal experiments. It's happening to you constantly. It's happening every single time you're stressed, worried, or overwhelmed. And when you're in that state, you literally cannot see opportunities that are right in front of you. Let me give you a practical example that you've probably experienced yourself. Imagine a woman, let's call her Rebecca, who's desperately unhappy in her relationship, but convinced that she needs to stay, because the right moment to leave hasn't come yet. She's waiting for financial stability. She's waiting for the kids to be older. She's waiting for something to shift externally that will make it easier. So she stays, stuck in this chronic state of discontent and anxiety. Her nervous system is in constant survival mode, scanning for ways to keep the peace, ways to be invisible, ways to manage the situation she's in. And then one day, someone casually mentions a therapist or a support group or a conversation starter, and it passes right through her awareness because her brain isn't open to possibilities. It's locked in problem management mode. But another woman, let's call her Sarah, finds herself in a similar, unhappy relationship. The difference is that Sarah has somehow managed to believe, even just a little bit, that things could change. She's not in a state of resignation. She's in a state of openness, even if it's tinged with anxiety. And then the same casual mention of a therapist comes her way, and something lands differently. She hears it. She follows up. She makes the call. 3 months later, her entire life has shifted. The difference wasn't luck. It was internal state. Now, here's the challenging part that most motivational books don't want to tell you. Your current internal state is almost certainly keeping you locked into a pattern of waiting. If you're anxious about money, you're in a state of scarcity, and that state makes you miss financial opportunities because you're too focused on what you don't have. If you're worried about your career, you're in a state of contraction, and that contraction prevents you from seeing the people you should be talking to or the opportunities that are actually available. If you're stressed about your health, you're in a state of threat detection. And ironically, that stress itself is one of the biggest obstacles to the wellness you're seeking. This is why the people who seem to get lucky appear to be so calm about things. It's not that they don't care. It's that they've learned, either consciously or unconsciously, to shift their internal state before they take action. They relax their nervous system. They open their attention. They create the internal environment where they can actually perceive what's available to them. And then, from that state, opportunities that were always there suddenly become visible. Think about the last time you were genuinely happy or peaceful. Maybe on a vacation, or in the first moments of a good news, or in deep connection with someone you love. In that state, your perception was completely different, wasn't it? You noticed things. You made connections. You said yes to things that normally you'd say no to because you were too worried or too contracted. You were open. You were flexible. You were able to see possibilities instead of problems. And that's the state where luck happens. So here's the real question. What if you didn't have to wait for external circumstances to shift before you could change your internal state? What if you could choose, right now, to shift how you're holding your body, how you're breathing, what you're focusing your attention on? Because you can. And that shift is the first step to actually noticing the opportunities that are already surrounding you. Here's your practice for today, and this one is important. I want you to notice when you're in a state of contraction. You'll feel it in your body. Maybe your shoulders are tight, your jaw is clenched, your chest feels compressed. You might notice it in your thoughts too. A constant loop of worry, a focus on what could go wrong, a sense of being stuck. When you notice that state, I want you to do something very specific. Take 3 deep breaths. Not the shallow breathing you do when you're anxious. Real breaths, in through your nose, out through your mouth. And as you breathe, gently drop your shoulders. Unclench your jaw, let your chest open. After just those 3 breaths, notice what changes. Does something feel different? Does your perspective shift even slightly? This is what it feels like to access a different internal state. A state where your brain can actually see opportunities instead of just scanning for threats. You can do this anywhere. Before you walk into a meeting, before you reach out to someone, before you go to an event where you might meet interesting people. This simple practice is the bridge between being someone who waits for luck and being someone who actually sees it when it arrives. But here's what makes this tricky. Just doing the breathing once won't reprogram your nervous system. You've spent years, maybe decades, in a state of contraction. You've learned to interpret the world as a place where you need to be vigilant, where something could go wrong, where you need to be careful. And that learning is deep. It's protective. It served you once, probably. It kept you safe or helped you survive something difficult. But now, it's keeping you stuck. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about how to actually rewire this pattern, how to train your brain to look for opportunities as naturally as it currently looks for threats. Because that's where real transformation happens, not in waiting for your moment, but in becoming the kind of person who recognizes their moment when it appears. Chapter 3. The myth. You can't train luck. Here's what Richard Wiseman did after he completed his newspaper experiment. He didn't just document the results and publish his findings. He went further. He created something he called the Luck School, a place where he gathered people who had consistently felt unlucky their entire lives, and he spent time teaching them the exact habits and perspectives that lucky people naturally possessed. And here's the part that matters. It worked. The people who went through his luck school didn't just feel luckier. Their lives actually changed. They started attracting better opportunities. They started making better decisions. They started noticing doors that they'd been walking past for years. But what's really interesting, what most people completely miss, is that Wiseman didn't teach them anything mystical or complicated. He didn't teach them to manifest or visualize or send energy out into the universe. He taught them simple, practical, repeatable skills. He taught them how to network differently. He taught them how to interpret chance encounters as opportunities instead of coincidences. He taught them how to break out of narrow thinking patterns that were keeping them stuck. And every single one of those skills is trainable. Every single one. The reason this matters so much right now is because you've probably spent your life being told one of two things about luck. Either you're the kind of person who gets lucky, in which case you probably feel some pressure to maintain that status, or you're the kind of person who doesn't, and you've made peace with that as just being how life is for you. Both of those beliefs are wrong. And they're wrong in a way that's keeping you from accessing the life you actually want. Think about this for a moment. There's a skill that you probably don't think of as a skill. The skill of noticing when someone's interested in you romantically. Somehow, without any formal training, you've learned to pick up on subtle signals. A certain kind of eye contact, a particular tone of voice, the way someone leans in when they're talking to you. You're constantly scanning for these signals, and when you see them, you recognize them immediately. It's become automatic. It's become intuitive. It's become a skill that lives in your nervous system so deeply that you don't even think of it as something you learned. You just know it. Now imagine if you applied that same level of attention, that same automatic awareness, to noticing opportunities in your career, your finances, your health, your relationships. What would change? What would shift if you trained your brain to spot an opening the way it spots romantic interest? What if you developed the same kind of intuitive sense for the moment when you should say yes to something? The moment when you should reach out to someone? The moment when you should take a risk? Here's what Wiseman's Luck School participants discovered. Luck isn't about things happening to you. It's about you being the right person in the right state to recognize and act on what's available, and the skills that make you that person are entirely learnable. You're not born with a limited supply of luck. You're not cursed. You're not unlucky. You've just never trained the skill of noticing, and you've never learned how to shift your internal state in a way that makes opportunity visible. One of the most powerful exercises from Wiseman's work involves something incredibly simple but absolutely transformative. He had people who felt persistently unlucky, start writing down 3 pieces of good luck that happened to them every single day. Just 3. It didn't have to be dramatic. It could be someone smiling at you. It could be finding a parking spot. It could be someone canceling a meeting that you didn't want to attend anyway. Anything that you could reasonably call lucky. And what happened was extraordinary. Within days, people started noticing luck everywhere. Within weeks, their actual circumstances started shifting because they were paying attention differently. They were looking for opportunities because they'd trained their brain to look for good things. This is the part that nobody wants to hear. Because it means you're responsible. It means that if you felt unlucky for years, it's not because the universe has it out for you, or because you missed your window, or because other people are just naturally luckier. It means that you've been training your brain very effectively to notice what's wrong, what's missing, what could go wrong. You've been so good at this training that it feels natural. It feels like the truth. It feels like just the way the world is. But it's not. It's a learned pattern. And learned patterns can be unlearned. Here's what's actually happening in your brain when you feel unlucky. Your reticular activating system, a part of your brain that filters information, is set to a particular frequency. It's like a radio that's tuned to "what could go wrong" station, and it's blasting that frequency constantly. And because that's what you're tuned into, that's all you hear. The opportunities are broadcasting on a different frequency, but you can't hear them because you're not tuned in. So you feel unlucky. You feel like things never work out for you. You feel like everyone else is getting breaks that you're not getting. But the breaks are there. You've just trained your attention not to see them. The good news, and I mean this genuinely, is that you can retune that radio. You can teach your brain to recognize a different frequency. You can train yourself to notice what's working, what's possible, what's becoming available. And it doesn't require years of practice or a complete personality overhaul. It requires consistent, deliberate attention to a new pattern until that pattern becomes automatic. Here's your practice for this chapter, and this one is foundational. Every evening for the next week, write down 3 pieces of luck that happened to you that day. It has to be 3, not 2, not 1, 3. Even if you have to stretch to find them, even if they seem small or insignificant. Someone was kind to you. Someone responded to your message faster than you expected. You found something you'd lost. You got to a store just before it closed. You had a conversation that made you laugh. These count. They absolutely count. And here's the critical part. As you're writing these down, I want you to notice how it feels different to be looking for what worked instead of what didn't work. Notice the shift in your mood, your energy, your sense of possibility. What you're doing is teaching your brain a new job. For years, it's been assigned to find problems. It's been excellent at that job, really, truly excellent. But now you're asking it to find something different. You're asking it to recognize luck, opportunity, and possibility. It's going to feel weird at first. Your brain might resist because it wants to stick with its familiar job. But if you do this consistently, something remarkable will happen. Your brain will start getting better at this new job. You'll start noticing luck naturally without having to force it. And as you notice more luck will actually start showing up in your life. Not because the universe is changing, but because you're finally seeing what was always there. Now, here's where it gets interesting. And here's where your life actually starts to change. Once you've trained yourself to notice opportunities, once your brain has learned this new skill, you still need to know what to do with them. You need to understand how to act on them, how to trust them, how to move forward with confidence even when you're not sure. Because noticing an opportunity and actually taking it are 2 completely different skills. And that's exactly what we're going to explore in the next chapter. Because luck isn't just about seeing, it's about acting. And that's where most people fall short. Chapter 4. Level 1. Learn to notice opportunities. There's a difference between seeing and noticing, and most people spend their lives confusing the 2. You can see something with your eyes and still miss it completely. Your brain has to be paying attention for something to actually register, and that's where most people fail. They're too busy looking at what's directly in front of them to notice what's happening on the periphery. They're too focused on executing the task at hand to see the opportunities that are available if they just looked slightly to the left or right or behind them. Think about the last time you went to a new city. Your attention was probably expanded. You were noticing details, the way the buildings were different, the kind of food people were eating, the conversations happening around you. Everything was interesting because your brain wasn't locked into a narrow focus. It was open. It was receptive. It was noticing. Now think about when you're at home, doing the same routine you do every day. Your attention is contracted. Your brain knows the route. It knows what to expect. It's probably not even fully conscious, You might drive to work and not remember the drive because your brain wasn't really paying attention. It was running on autopilot. This is the first skill of luck at the beginner level. Learning to expand your attention the way you do in a new city, even in the places you've been 1,000 times. This is what Wiseman's research showed over and over again. Lucky people have what's called a broader perceptual field. They're taking in more information. They're noticing more. And that broader perceptual field is what allows them to spot opportunities that others miss. Here's what's really interesting about this. Your brain can't actually pay attention to everything simultaneously. It's not possible. Your brain is constantly filtering information and deciding what deserves your attention and what can be ignored. So the real skill isn't seeing more. It's training your brain to expand the category of what it considers worth paying attention to. Right now, your brain has probably been trained, often by painful experience, to narrow down and focus on threats, a loud noise, a critical comment, a financial problem. These things jump to the top of your attention hierarchy because your brain learned a long time ago that noticing threats kept you safe. But here's the problem with that system. It also filters out opportunities. It filters out the person who could become a valuable contact because you're focused on your anxiety about the event. It filters out the business idea that someone mentions because you're worried about money. It filters out the chance to say something meaningful because you're thinking about what could go wrong. Your attention is so locked into threat detection mode that it's literally blind to possibility. Now, expanding your attention isn't about forcing yourself to be positive or pretending threats don't exist. It's not about becoming someone who ignores problems or denies reality. It's about training your brain to develop what researchers call soft focus, a way of paying attention that holds both the reality of challenges and the possibility of opportunities at the same time. You can acknowledge that something is hard and also notice that there might be a creative solution. You can see that a situation is difficult and also recognize that someone in the room might be able to help. You can feel afraid and still look around for what's available. This is what lucky people do naturally. They're not ignoring problems. They're just not letting their attention get completely hijacked by them. There's a distinction. There's space. There's the ability to hold multiple perspectives at once. And that skill, that way of attending to the world, is absolutely trainable. Let me give you an example that might resonate. Imagine someone who's recently lost their job. Two different people experience that same event. One person goes into pure panic mode. They're thinking about bills, about security, about how they're going to tell their family. Their entire attention is consumed by the threat. They're calling everyone to complain about how unfair it is, but they're not actually looking at what opportunities the time off might present. Meanwhile, another person experiences the same loss, and they feel the fear. They're not pretending it's not there, but they're also asking themselves, what is now possible that wasn't possible before? Who should I reconnect with? What have I always wanted to try? Is there a project I could start? Their attention is broad enough to hold both the loss and the possibility. And here's what happens next in the story. The first person stays unemployed for months, getting more and more anxious, until eventually they take the first job that comes along, often a lateral move or even a step backward. The second person, meanwhile, because they were paying attention to what might be possible, they reconnect with someone who mentions an opportunity, or they start a small project that leads to something bigger, or they finally give themselves permission to do something they've been thinking about for years. The difference in outcomes isn't that they're luckier. It's that they were paying attention to a different set of possibilities. Here's what I want you to understand about this level of luck. It's not about having better circumstances. It's about having a different relationship with your attention. It's about learning to see more of what's actually there, instead of just seeing what your fear is highlighting. And the way you start training this skill is simple, but requires consistent practice. Here's your practice for this level. For the next 3 days, I want you to do something called attention expansion. Pick one activity that you do on autopilot. Maybe it's your commute, or your lunch break, or a walk around your neighborhood. And during that activity, I want you to notice 5 things that you've never paid attention to before. They can be anything. The color of a sign you pass every day, the way people are dressed, the different conversations you hear, the plants or trees, the architecture. The point isn't to find anything profound. The point is to practice expanding your perceptual field. You're essentially telling your brain, there's more to pay attention to than just the things I'm worried about. After you do this for 3 days, notice what happens. Notice if your mood shifts slightly. Notice if you start seeing more possibilities. Notice if small connections start appearing that weren't visible before. This is what expansion feels like. This is what it feels like to be paying attention to more than just threats. And this is the foundation. This is where luck begins. Not with opportunity magically appearing, but with you being awake enough to see what's been there all along. But here's the challenge that most people run into at this level. You can expand your attention for a few minutes, sure. You can do the exercise. But then you go back to your normal state, your contracted, worried, focused on threat state. And all that work disappears. The skill doesn't stick because you haven't addressed the underlying reason your attention got contracted in the first place. You haven't worked with your nervous system. You haven't trained yourself to stay in that expanded state even when you're feeling pressure or fear. And that's what we're going to work on in the next chapter. Because noticing is only the first step. You also have to learn how to trust what you're noticing and how to act on it, even when your fear is telling you to stay small and play it safe. Chapter 5. Level 1. Learn to trust your intuition, the Helen Hadsell principle. There's a moment that happens to almost every person who starts to expand their attention and notice more. They see an opportunity. They sense something. They feel a pull toward something or someone. And then, immediately, and I mean immediately, they start doubting it. They start asking themselves, is this real? Am I imagining this? Should I actually pursue this? Or am I being foolish? And in that moment of doubt, the opportunity often passes. Someone else who didn't hesitate steps in. Someone who trusted their gut takes the chance. And the person who doubted themselves is left wondering what might have been. This is where intuition comes in. And this is where Helen Hadsell's system becomes so powerful. Because she understood something that most people never figure out. The gut instinct that tells you to pursue something isn't random. It's not mystical. Your unconscious mind is constantly processing information, patterns, signals, data. And when it recognizes something worth paying attention to, it sends you a signal. We call it intuition. We call it a hunch. We call it a feeling. But what's really happening is that your brain is doing incredibly sophisticated pattern recognition below the level of conscious awareness. Helen Hadsell's SPEC method, select, project, expect, collect, worked so brilliantly because it was built on understanding intuition at this deeper level. The first step, select, is about choosing what you want with absolute clarity. But here's the part that's critical. It's not just about choosing logically. It's about choosing something that resonates with you at a gut level. You feel it. You know it. There's an internal yes that goes beyond rational analysis. And that yes is incredibly important, because it's your intuition telling you that this aligns with who you actually are and what you actually want. Think about the difference between two kinds of goals. One person decides they want to make $1 million because they think that's what successful people do. There's no real passion there. It's an external goal, something imposed from outside. Another person feels a deep pull toward building something meaningful, something that serves people, something that makes them come alive. When they pursue that second goal, they're following their intuition. They're following the yes that comes from inside them. And when you're pursuing something that genuinely resonates with your intuition, you stay committed through challenges. You notice opportunities related to that goal. You attract people and resources that align with it. Here's what Helen discovered through 5,000 contest wins. The contests she felt intuitively pulled toward were the ones she won. The ones she approached as just a logical exercise with no real feeling of connection were the ones that eluded her. She developed an almost uncanny ability to know, before she even entered, which contests she was going to win. It wasn't magical. It was intuitive wisdom guiding her toward what was actually available to her. Now, the problem is that most of us have learned to override our intuition constantly. We've been trained to dismiss our gut feelings as irrational. We've been told to think logically, to analyze, to weigh the pros and cons. And logical thinking has its place, absolutely. But intuition is also data. It's real information. Your body knows things your conscious mind hasn't figured out yet. When you meet someone and you get a good feeling about them, even though you can't quite articulate why, that's real information. When you're considering a job and something feels off, even though the salary is good and the position looks great on paper, that's real information. Your intuition is picking up on subtle cues that your conscious mind hasn't processed yet. The challenge at this level is learning to listen to your intuition without letting it paralyze you with doubt. You need to develop what we might call confident intuition. The ability to sense something and act on it, even when you can't fully explain why. And this is trainable. This is a skill. It starts with noticing when you have an intuitive hit and then paying attention to what happens when you follow it versus when you ignore it. Let me give you a practical example that might hit home. Sarah received a LinkedIn message from someone she'd worked with years ago. The message was simple, just a greeting and a suggestion to grab coffee. Her first instinct was a definite yes. Something about reconnecting with this person felt important, even though she couldn't have explained why. But then doubt crept in. She was busy. It might be awkward. Maybe this person just wanted something from her. She almost didn't go. But at the last minute, she decided to trust the feeling and show up anyway. That coffee led to a conversation that sparked a business idea. The business idea led to a partnership. The partnership transformed her career. And it all started because she had an intuitive yes, and despite her doubts, she followed it. This is the second principle of Level 1 Luck. Learning to recognize your intuitive hits and acting on them with confidence. You don't need to understand why you're being pulled towards something. You don't need complete certainty. You just need to be willing to follow the signal and see where it leads. Here's your practice for this level. And it's deceptively simple, but incredibly powerful. I want you to pay attention to your intuitive hits over the next week. These are the moments when something feels right, when you sense an opportunity, when you feel drawn towards something. When you notice one of these hits, I want you to do something unusual. Act on it within 24 hours. Don't overthink it. Don't analyze it to death. Don't wait for more information. Just move. The movement doesn't have to be huge. It could be sending a message, making a call, going to an event you were invited to, or saying yes to something you normally would decline. The point is to practice trusting your intuition by following it and seeing what happens. After you do this, notice what emerges. Sometimes your intuitive hit leads directly to an opportunity. Sometimes it leads to information that you'll use later. Sometimes it leads to a conversation that plants a seed. The key is that you're training your system to trust intuition. You're building neural pathways that say, "My gut instinct is worth acting on." And as you practice this, two things will happen. Your intuition will become clearer, and you'll start attracting more opportunities simply because you're the kind of person who acts on possibilities instead of overthinking them away. But here's where most people get stuck at this level. They can notice opportunities. They can even trust their intuition sometimes. But they still don't take consistent action. They still hold back. They still let fear keep them small. They still wait for the perfect moment or complete certainty before they move. And that hesitation, that reluctance to fully commit to the opportunities they see, is what keeps them from experiencing real transformation. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about how to move through that hesitation, how to act with speed and commitment, and how that speed is actually what creates luck more than anything else. Chapter 6. Level 1. Act with speed. Why hesitation costs you everything. There's a brutal truth that cuts deeper than most people want to acknowledge, and it explains why some people experience consistent opportunity while others feel perpetually overlooked. The person who hesitates loses the moment. Not in every situation, and not always, but frequently enough that hesitation becomes one of the most expensive habits you can possibly develop in your life. When you see an opportunity emerging in front of you and feel the pull toward it, that sense that this is something worth pursuing, something that aligns with who you actually are, what happens next determines everything. Instead of moving forward, you pause. You tell yourself that you need more time to think about it, that you should sleep on it, that you need to gather more information before you can feel secure enough to commit. You try to engineer certainty before you take action, and in trying to protect yourself, you lose everything. This is what separates people who consistently experience good luck from people who experience it rarely. It's not that lucky people are smarter or better prepared or have access to more resources than you do. It's that they've learned to trust their rapid decision-making process deeply enough that they act on intuitive hits, even when they don't have complete certainty. They've trained themselves to move before they're 100% sure. And that speed, that willingness to commit to a direction before all the information is in, is actually what creates the momentum that leads to real, tangible opportunities. Think back to Wiseman's research on luck for a moment, but look at it through a different lens. The lucky people in his experiments didn't just notice the message about the 250 pounds. They also acted on it immediately. They didn't sit with the information. They didn't think about whether they should tell the researcher. They simply moved. This immediate action, this willingness to trust what they were perceiving enough to commit to it, is what showed up over and over in his interviews with lucky people. They made decisions quickly. They committed to directions, even without complete information. They discovered what was possible by doing, not by thinking about doing. Here's something that might resonate uncomfortably with you. How many times in your life have you had a good instinct, a good idea, or what felt like a genuine opportunity, and you've waited? You've told yourself that you'd pursue it next week, or that you needed to think about it more, or that you should wait until the timing was better or you were more prepared. And then next week becomes next month. Or you've thought about it so much that you've talked yourself out of it entirely. Or the circumstances have shifted in ways that make the original opportunity no longer available. Someone else has moved in. The moment has closed. The window has shut. And you're left living in the space of almost did that, almost said yes to that person, almost pursued that idea. Almost might be one of the most painful emotional states to inhabit repeatedly. Let me give you a scenario that probably feels familiar in its specifics, even if the details differ. Someone gets introduced to a potential business partner through mutual connections. The conversation flows naturally. The energy between them is clear and genuine. There's obvious complementary skill sets and mutual interest. But instead of moving forward to explore the possibility, the person hesitates. They say they need to think about it, that they should talk to their accountant, that they need to make sure the timing is actually right. 6 months pass. The potential partner has moved forward with someone else. They've partnered with a different person. They've shifted their vision entirely. And the hesitant person is still evaluating. They're still in the thinking phase. They've lost the window by the time they finally decided to move. Now imagine a different person in an identical situation. They feel the same hesitation initially. They have the same concerns about whether this is the right move, but instead of letting those concerns paralyze them into inaction, they take a small step forward to gather real data. They agree to explore one small project together. They have another conversation to clarify alignment on key issues. Through that action, through actually doing something instead of just thinking about it, they gather real evidence. They discover how the partnership actually works in practice, not how they imagined it might work in theory. They see whether the complementarity is real or just theoretical. And because they moved quickly, they were available when the opportunity solidified into something concrete and real. Helen Hadsell understood this principle so viscerally that it became the foundation of her entire approach to winning contests. When she felt an intuitive pull toward entering a particular contest, she didn't deliberate endlessly about whether it was the right choice. She entered it. She committed fully to winning it. She took the action. And because she was willing to move immediately on her intuitions, she discovered which ones were actually reliable and which ones weren't. She learned through rapid iteration and experimentation, not through endless analysis. That willingness to enter 5,000 contests, which necessarily meant being willing to fail 5,000 times, is what ultimately built her remarkable track record of success. It wasn't just that she won. It was that she was willing to risk losing repeatedly, and that willingness is what made her a consistent winner. This is the crux of what separates intermediate luck from beginner luck. You can notice opportunities. You can trust your intuition about what feels right. But if you don't act on those intuitions with speed and commitment, you'll never actually experience what those opportunities could have become. The action is where the real luck lives. The speed is where the transformation happens. Now, I want to be absolutely clear about something important. Acting with speed doesn't mean being reckless or throwing caution to the wind. It doesn't mean making decisions that could genuinely harm you or endanger your stability. What it means is being willing to move on incomplete information. It means accepting that you will never have perfect certainty before you act. That certainty only comes after you've already committed and started moving forward. It means trusting yourself enough to know that you're intelligent and resourceful enough to figure things out as you go. Most importantly, it means understanding that the cost of hesitation, all the opportunities you miss, all the relationships you never build, all the experiences you never have, because you waited for perfect conditions that will never arrive. is almost always far higher than the cost of moving forward and discovering that something isn't right. Here's your practice for this level of luck. And it's one that will genuinely shift your relationship with risk and opportunity. For the next 7 days, I want you to identify 3 moments when you feel a clear, intuitive pull towards something. Maybe it's a conversation you've been wanting to have with someone, or a message you've been meaning to send, or an event you want to attend, or a small risk you've been considering taking. When you notice that pull, when you feel that intuitive yes, I want you to act on it within the same day. Don't give yourself time to build the case for hesitation. Don't let the voice of doubt expand and take over. Just move. Send the message. Make the call. Show up to the event. Take the small risk. What you're actually doing in this practice is retraining your nervous system to recognize that action is genuinely safer than hesitation. You're building new neural pathways that say, my intuition is worth moving on, and I'm capable of figuring out what to do as I take action. Pay careful attention to what happens when you do this. You'll probably discover that most of the things you were terrified would go wrong actually don't. You'll find that people generally respond positively to genuine interest and genuine action. You'll notice that moving forward opens doors that hesitation would have kept permanently sealed shut. And gradually, you'll feel something shift in your fundamental relationship with risk and uncertainty. Instead of seeing hesitation as a form of safety, which it never really is, you'll start seeing it as the actual risk. Instead of seeing action as dangerous, you'll start seeing it as the path that leads toward the life you actually want to be living. But here's where the first level of luck ends and the second level begins. Acting quickly and following your intuition will get you noticed. It will open some doors and create real momentum. But to move beyond occasional lucky breaks, to actually create consistent, reliable opportunities instead of just getting lucky when the stars happen to align, you need something more. You need to understand how to build your network intentionally and strategically, how to position yourself in the kinds of places where luck is more likely to find you, how to create your own opportunities instead of just waiting and hoping for them to arrive. And that's exactly what we're going to explore together in the next section. Because luck at the intermediate level isn't about being randomly in the right place at the right time. It's about becoming the kind of person that the right place and the right time are constantly finding and seeking out. Chapter 7. Level 2. Create your own opportunities, the networking principle. There's a fundamental shift that happens when you move from beginner luck to intermediate luck, and it's this. You stop waiting for opportunities to find you, and you start actively creating the conditions where opportunities are more likely to appear. This isn't luck in the traditional sense. It's not random chance or cosmic alignment. It's a deliberate strategy that lucky people have understood for centuries, even if they didn't always have a name for it. And the strategy is beautifully simple. You build a network of relationships with people who are intelligent, interesting, and generative. People who are out there doing things, creating things, building things. And you position yourself close to that activity. Think about how opportunity actually works in the real world. Most genuine opportunities don't come from nowhere. They come through people. Someone knows someone who's looking for exactly the kind of person you are. Someone has heard about a project that needs your specific skills. Someone is building something and suddenly remembers you because you once had a conversation that stuck with them. These aren't coincidences or strokes of pure luck. They're the natural byproduct of being connected to people who are actively creating and moving forward in their lives and work. Here's what research on successful people consistently shows. Most major life changes, job transitions, business opportunities, meaningful relationships, creative collaborations don't come from formal job postings or official channels. They come through casual conversations with people in your network. Someone mentions something in passing. You happen to be there. You're suddenly relevant. You're suddenly the person who has exactly what someone needs. And because you've built a relationship with that person over time, they think of you when the opportunity arises. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think networking is about collecting business cards, or building a huge LinkedIn following, or forcing themselves to attend events they don't want to be at. They think it's about being transactional, always looking for what they can get from someone else. And because they approach it that way, it feels exhausting and inauthentic, and they either avoid it entirely or do it in a way that feels desperately uncomfortable. The real networking that creates luck is completely different. It's not about the size of your network. It's about the quality of your connections and, more importantly, the quality of who you show up as within those connections. It's about being genuinely interested in other people. It's about asking real questions and listening to the answers. It's about remembering what matters to them and following up on it later. It's about being someone people actually want to know and spend time with, not someone they're trying to escape. Think about the people in your life who you actually enjoy being around. What do they have in common? Probably they're interested in you. They ask about your life. They remember details you mentioned months ago. They seem genuinely curious about what you're working on. They're not always trying to get something from you. They're present when they're with you. Now imagine if you brought that same quality of attention and genuine interest to everyone you interact with. Not in a forced way, but authentically. That quality of presence and interest is magnetic. People want to be around it. And when you're around people, when they know you, when they understand what matters to you and what you're capable of, that's when opportunities naturally flow toward you. Here's a concrete example of how this works. Marcus was stuck in a job he hated, but he didn't immediately start aggressively networking or spamming his contacts looking for opportunities. Instead, he did something simpler. He started having coffee with people he genuinely wanted to know better. He asked them about their work, their challenges, their vision for what they were building. He listened more than he talked. He was interested in their lives. Over the course of a year, he had probably 30 or 40 of these conversations. He wasn't networking in the traditional sense. He wasn't asking anyone for a job or trying to be transactional. He was just building real relationships with people he found interesting. Then one day, someone he'd had coffee with months earlier reached out. She was starting a new venture and remembered something Marcus had said in their conversation. Something about how he'd always wanted to work in this exact space. She asked if he'd be interested in being her partner. That opportunity, the opportunity that changed his entire career, didn't come from a job search or a formal pitch. It came because he'd shown genuine interest in someone else, had built a real relationship, and had been available and present enough that when the opportunity arose, she thought of him. This is what Helen Hadsell understood about luck that most people miss. She didn't just win contests through willpower or visualization or positive thinking. She positioned herself in places where winners were gathered. She learned from people who had won before. She built relationships with people who knew the system. She surrounded herself with people who were actively engaged in winning. And that immersion in the environment of success, that access to knowledge and connections and possibilities that come from being close to successful people, that's what created the conditions for her own success. The second principle of intermediate luck is this: build your network with intention, but with authenticity. Don't force it. Don't be transactional. Don't pretend to be interested in people you're not interested in. But do deliberately seek out people who are interesting, who are doing things, who are thinking about the kinds of problems or possibilities that matter to you. And do show up authentically in those relationships. Be curious. Be present. Be the kind of person that other people actually want to know and think of when opportunities arise. Here's your practice for this level. Over the next month, I want you to identify 5 people who are doing interesting work. People who might not be in your immediate circle. People you'd like to know better or learn from. These could be people in your industry, people working on projects you find compelling, people who embody qualities you respect. Reach out to each of them with a genuine request for their time. Be specific about why you're interested in knowing them. Don't ask for anything. Don't pitch them. Just ask if they'd be open to a conversation, maybe a coffee call or a lunch, where you could learn about what they're working on. What you're doing in this practice is training yourself to think like someone who creates opportunities instead of someone who waits for them. You're building the relationships that, over time, will become the source of the biggest opportunities in your life. You're positioning yourself close to interesting people and interesting work. And you're doing it authentically, with genuine interest, not from a place of desperation or transactional need. Most of these conversations probably won't lead directly to an opportunity. That's not the point. The point is that you're building a network of relationships with people who are engaged, creative, and moving forward. And as that network grows and deepens over time, opportunities naturally begin to flow through it. People think of you when something relevant comes up. You hear about things before they become widely known. You have access to knowledge and connections that people outside your network don't have. And suddenly, you're not waiting for luck to find you anymore. You've positioned yourself in a place where luck is far more likely to appear. But here's where many people get stuck at this level. They can build a network. They can have interesting conversations, but they still don't know how to actually navigate challenges when they arise. They still let setbacks derail them. They still interpret failure as evidence that they're not lucky, rather than understanding that everyone who succeeds encounters failure regularly. The difference is how they respond to it. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about how lucky people interpret and move through difficulty, and how that interpretation is what actually determines whether you grow from challenges or whether they defeat you. Chapter 8. Level 2. Navigate failure. Like a lucky person, the resilience principle. Here's something that nobody tells you when they're talking about lucky people. They fail constantly. They fail more than unsuccessful people do, in fact. The difference isn't that they don't encounter obstacles or setbacks or disappointment. The difference is how they interpret those failures and what they do after they happen. This is the invisible skill that separates people who eventually reach their goals from people who give up somewhere along the way. Think back to Helen Hadsell for a moment. To win 5,000 contests, she had to enter far more than 5,000 contests. That means she lost thousands of times. She entered contests she didn't win. She pursued opportunities that went to someone else. She took chances that didn't pay off. But here's the critical thing. She didn't interpret those losses as evidence that she was unlucky or that her system didn't work. She interpreted them as data. She asked herself, what did I learn from this? What would I do differently next time? How does this failure actually inform my next move? And because she asked those questions instead of spiraling into self-doubt, each failure made her better at the game she was playing. This is what Carol Dweck's research on mindset revealed so powerfully. People with what she calls a growth mindset. People who believe that their abilities can be developed and improved through effort respond to failure very differently than people with a fixed mindset. People who believe that their abilities are largely unchangeable. When someone with a growth mindset encounters failure, they interpret it as feedback. They become more engaged, more curious, more determined to understand what went wrong and how to improve. When someone with a fixed mindset encounters failure, they interpret it as proof that they don't have what it takes. They become discouraged, they disengage, and they often give up. The lucky people in Wiseman's research had something in common. They possessed what we might call a lucky interpretation of failure. When something didn't work out, they didn't blame themselves or assume they were inadequate. They didn't take it personally or let it define them. Instead, they asked practical questions. What can I learn from this? Who could I talk to who might have different perspective? Is there a different approach I haven't tried yet? What does this failure reveal about what might work better? This interpretation, this way of treating failure as information rather than as identity, is what allowed them to keep moving forward. Let me give you a scenario that probably resonates. Jennifer wanted to transition into a new career field. She was skilled in her current work, but she felt called towards something different, something more aligned with her values and her actual interests. So she started reaching out to people in her target field. She attended events, she had conversations. She started positioning herself to learn the landscape. Then she applied for a position that felt like a perfect fit. She didn't get it. Another candidate was chosen. And in that moment, Jennifer faced a choice. She could interpret the rejection as evidence that she wasn't ready, that maybe she'd been foolish to think about changing careers, that she should just stay where she was. Or she could interpret it as a data point. Maybe she needed more specific skills. Or maybe she hadn't fully understood what that particular company was looking for. Or maybe that specific role wasn't actually the right fit, even though it looked good on paper. Jennifer chose the second interpretation. She reached out to the person who got the job and asked if they'd be willing to have a conversation. She asked them what they thought gave them an edge. She asked what they'd done to prepare. She asked what they thought the company was really looking for. And through that conversation, she gathered crucial information about what she needed to develop. 6 months later, when a similar position opened up at a different company, she was better prepared. She understood the landscape more deeply. She understood what was actually required, not just what was listed in the job description. And this time, she got the role. The difference between Jennifer and someone who gives up after a rejection isn't intelligence or talent or luck in the traditional sense. It's the interpretation. It's the willingness to see failure not as a reflection of who you are, but as information about what you need to learn or do differently. It's the resilience that comes from understanding that everyone who succeeds has failed multiple times. The difference is they didn't stop. Here's what's actually happening in your brain when you interpret failure as permanent versus temporary, as personal versus external, as unchangeable versus changeable. Your interpretation activates different neural pathways. If you tell yourself, "I failed because I'm not good enough," your brain goes into what researchers call a threat response. Your amygdala activates. Your thinking becomes more rigid and defensive. You're less able to learn from the experience because you're in survival mode, not learning mode. But if you tell yourself, "I failed because I haven't learned the right approach yet," your brain stays in learning mode. You're curious. You're flexible. You're able to extract the information that will help you succeed next time. This is why lucky people seem to recover from setbacks so quickly and move forward with such conviction. They're literally operating from a different neural state. They're not in threat mode. They're in learning mode. They're asking questions instead of making judgments. And that state, that openness and curiosity in the face of failure, is what allows them to keep moving forward and actually improve. Now here's the challenging part that most people don't want to hear. Your interpretation of failure determines whether you grow or whether you stagnate. And that interpretation is a choice. It's not something that happens to you. It's something you choose, often unconsciously, in the moments after something doesn't work out. But you can make it conscious. You can practice it. You can train yourself to interpret failures in a way that supports your growth instead of confirming your limitations. Think about the last significant failure or setback you experienced. How did you interpret it? Did you tell yourself it meant something was wrong with you? Did you make it mean that you weren't capable? Did you use it as evidence that you should give up or stay small? Or did you ask yourself what you could learn from it? Did you get curious about what went wrong and what you might do differently? The quality of that interpretation is what determines whether that failure becomes a stepping stone or a stopping point. Here's your practice for this level. I want you to identify a failure or setback that you're still carrying. Something that didn't work out the way you hoped, something that disappointed you. It could be from last month or last year or even further back. Now I want you to reframe it using the growth mindset approach. Instead of telling the story as, I failed because I'm not good enough at this, tell it as, I encountered feedback that taught me something important about what I need to learn or do differently. Write out that reframed story. What specifically did you learn from that failure? What do you now understand about yourself, about the situation, about what's required for success that you didn't understand before? How would you approach a similar situation differently now? What you're doing in this practice is rewiring your relationship with failure. You're training your brain to see setbacks as information instead of identity. You're building the resilience that comes from understanding that failure is part of the path to success, not evidence that you should abandon the path. And as you practice this interpretation, you'll notice something remarkable starting to happen. You'll stop being afraid of trying things. You'll take more risks because failure feels less catastrophic. You'll move forward more confidently because you trust that you can learn and adapt. But here's where level 2 reaches its limit. You can build a strong network. You can interpret failures as feedback instead of identity. But if you're not clear about what you actually want, if you're not aligned with your deeper values and vision, you'll find yourself building a network and recovering from failures in service of goals that don't actually matter to you. You'll have success that feels hollow because it's not the success you genuinely wanted. And that's where level 3 comes in, where we talk about how lucky people align their actions with their actual vision, how they create the internal clarity that makes opportunity magnetic, and how they become the kind of person that luck naturally gravitates toward. Chapter 9. Level 2. Align your goals with your reality, the reticular activating system principle. There's a neurological mechanism in your brain called the reticular activating system, and it's one of the most powerful tools you have for creating the kind of life you actually want. This system acts like a filter. It decides what information your conscious mind pays attention to and what it ignores. Right now, your reticular activating system is tuned to a particular frequency based on what you've told it to look for. And that frequency determines what you see, what you notice, and ultimately, what opportunities become available to you. Here's how it works in practice. You decide you want to buy a particular car. Let's say a blue Honda Civic. Suddenly, you start seeing blue Honda Civics everywhere. Did the number of blue Honda Civics actually increase? No. What changed is that your reticular activating system is now tuned to notice them. Your brain is searching for them because you've given it a clear target. Before you decided on the car, those same blue Honda Civics were driving past you every day. But your brain filtered them out because they weren't relevant to your goals. This mechanism isn't limited to cars. It works with people, opportunities, resources, knowledge, everything. This is why clarity about what you actually want is one of the most underrated tools for creating luck. When you're vague about your goals, when you're pursuing things because you think you should or because other people expect it, your reticular activating system doesn't know what to look for. Your brain isn't tuned. It's like having a radio that's not locked onto any particular station. You're getting static instead of a clear signal. But when you're crystal clear about what you want, when you've articulated it specifically and emotionally, your brain's filter activates. It starts noticing things. It starts making connections. It starts attracting opportunities that align with what you're looking for. Think about the difference between two people. One person says, "I want to be successful." That's so vague that their reticular activating system barely activates. What does success mean? In what domain? What would it actually look like in their life? Their brain can't search for something it can't clearly envision. Another person says, "I want to build a business that serves small business owners by helping them streamline their accounting processes, and I want to make enough money that I have time freedom to spend with my family." Now their brain has something to work with. It's scanning for opportunities related to small business, accounting solutions, efficiency systems. When they're in a conversation, certain comments stand out because they relate to their clearly defined goal. When they're reading, certain articles catch their attention. When they're at events, certain people and conversations feel relevant. Their brain is literally filtering the world differently because they've given it a clear signal about what matters. Here's where most people get stuck with goals. They set them in a rational, logical way. They make a list. They decide what they think they should want. But that logical goal setting bypasses the emotional and intuitive parts of your brain that actually drive behavior and perception. You can consciously decide that you want to lose weight. But if losing weight doesn't connect emotionally to anything that matters to you, to your values, to your vision, to who you actually want to be, your reticular activating system won't activate fully. You'll have willpower for a while, but you won't have the deeper drive that comes from genuine alignment. This is why Helen Hadsell's select step in her SPEC system was so powerful. She didn't just decide she wanted to win contests. She had to feel it. She had to visualize it emotionally. She had to connect it to something that mattered. She had to make it real in her internal experience before she could make it real in the external world. And because she had that emotional clarity and alignment, her brain was constantly searching for ways to make it happen. Her reticular activating system was tuned. She was noticing opportunities that other people were walking past because her brain knew exactly what she was searching for. Now here's the crucial part that most goal-setting advice misses. Your goals need to align, not just with your desires, but with your values and your actual life circumstances. You can want something desperately, but if it requires you to sacrifice the things that actually matter to you, if it requires you to become someone you don't want to be, then alignment is broken. And when alignment is broken, your reticular activating system creates conflict instead of clarity. You're sending your brain mixed signals. You're saying, "I want this," while simultaneously saying, "but not if it means X." And that contradiction prevents the system from working effectively. Think about someone who wants to become wealthy but whose deepest value is family time. There's no fundamental conflict there. You can build wealth while protecting family time. But many paths to wealth require sacrificing one for the other. If that person pursues a goal that demands 80-hour work weeks, they're pursuing it in a way that violates their core values. The internal conflict will sabotage them. They'll succeed externally, but fail internally. They'll reach the goal and feel hollow because they've compromised what actually matters to them to get there. Let me give you a concrete example. Sarah wanted to transition into a leadership role at her company. On the surface, that seemed like a clear goal, but when she got honest with herself, she realized something. The kind of leadership role available in her current company would require her to manage people in ways that didn't align with how she wanted to lead. It would require a level of political maneuvering that felt inauthentic to her. So instead of pushing toward that goal, she got clear about what actually mattered to her. Having influence, developing people, and maintaining integrity. Once she had that clarity, her reticular activating system activated differently. She started noticing opportunities to start her own coaching practice. She heard about organizations that needed exactly the kind of leadership she wanted to provide. She had conversations that led to partnerships. She wasn't pursuing the original goal anymore, but she was pursuing something more aligned with who she actually was. And opportunities started flowing because her brain was searching for things that matched her authentic vision, not someone else's definition of success. Here's where many people sabotage themselves with their networks and their resilience practice. They build strong relationships. They recover from failures. But they're doing it all in service of goals that don't actually align with their values or their life. And that misalignment means that even when they succeed externally, they feel empty internally. They've tuned their reticular activating system to the wrong frequency. Your practice for this level asks you to do something deeper than most goal-setting exercises. I want you to get crystal clear about what you actually want, not what you think you should want, not what other people expect of you, but what genuinely calls to you. And more importantly, I want you to get clear about your non-negotiables, the things that matter so much to you that you won't sacrifice them to achieve your goals. Maybe it's family time. Maybe it's creative expression. Maybe it's integrity or adventure or rest. Identify 3 to 5 core values that are absolutely non-negotiable for you. Then I want you to articulate your actual goal in a way that honors those non-negotiables. Not, I want to be wealthy, but rather, I want to build financial security while maintaining time with my family and pursuing work that feels meaningful. Not, I want to be successful, but rather, I want to create something that helps people while staying true to my authentic approach and taking care of my health. Once you have that clarity, once your goal is articulated in a way that aligns with your values and your actual life, write it down. Put it somewhere you see it regularly. And then notice what changes. Notice how your attention shifts. Notice what starts becoming visible to you. Notice how conversations start flowing toward your actual goal instead of just toward a goal you thought you should have. Your reticular activating system will activate with a clarity it never had before, and opportunities will start appearing that align with what you actually want. But here's the thing about level 2 of luck. It's sustainable, but it requires constant maintenance. You have to keep building your network. You have to keep interpreting failures as feedback. You have to keep your reticular activating system aligned with your actual values. The work doesn't stop. And for many people, that constant work eventually becomes exhausting. They reach a point where they want something different, not just more success, but a different relationship with success itself. They want to become someone for whom luck feels less like work and more like the natural byproduct of who they've become. And that's where level 3 comes in. That's where we talk about mastery, about integration, about becoming the kind of person that luck naturally gravitates toward without constant effort or vigilance. Chapter 10. Level 3. Integrate all skills, the Master's Day. There's a moment that arrives for people who've genuinely done the work of becoming lucky. It's not a dramatic moment, often. It's not a sudden realization or turning point where everything changes overnight. It's more subtle than that. It's the moment when all the practices you've been doing, the noticing, the trusting your intuition, the quick action, the intentional networking, the resilient interpretation of failures, the clarity about your values, all of it integrates into who you actually are. You're no longer practicing luck. You're living it. You're no longer thinking about these skills. You're just naturally embodying them as a person. This is the difference between level 2 and level 3. At level 2, you're still doing the work. You're still consciously building your network, still deliberately reframing failures, still checking in with whether you're aligned with your values. It requires attention. It requires effort. But at level 3, this way of being has become internalized. It's become who you are, not what you do. And when that integration happens, something remarkable shifts. Opportunities don't just come more frequently. They start feeling inevitable. Luck stops feeling like chance and starts feeling like the natural consequence of who you've become. What does a day in the life of a level 3, a luck master, actually look like? Let me paint you a picture based on what Wiseman and other researchers have observed in genuinely lucky people. It's not glamorous. It's not dramatic. But it's generative in a way that creates constant opportunity. A luck master wakes up without an exhausting internal conflict about their life. They're fundamentally aligned with what they're doing because they've made sure their work connects to their values. There's no part of them that's sabotaging from the inside. There's congruence, so they start the day from a place of internal coherence rather than internal resistance. That coherence shows up in their energy, in their presence, in the quality of their attention. Throughout their day, a luck master is genuinely interested in people they encounter. That interest isn't forced. It's not a strategy they're employing. It's just natural because they've internalized the understanding that people are endlessly interesting and that relationships are the primary source of opportunity. So when they're in a conversation, they're actually present. They're actually listening. They remember what people say. And people feel that genuine interest. They're naturally drawn to someone who's actually present with them. When a luck master encounters an obstacle or something doesn't work out the way they expected, they're not rattled. They've done the work of understanding that failure is information, not identity. So they're immediately curious. What does this reveal? What can I learn? How do I need to adjust? They move through difficulties with resilience, not because they're pretending to be resilient, but because they've rewired their relationship with failure. They trust their ability to learn and adapt. That trust shows up as calm problem-solving rather than panic or despair. A luck master is action-oriented without being reckless. They've practiced trusting their intuition for so long that they know the difference between a genuine intuitive hit and anxiety masquerading as intuition. They move quickly on the things that feel genuinely aligned, but they don't second-guess themselves constantly or spiral into analysis paralysis. They've built the skill of rapid, confident decision-making. A luck master also understands something deep about giving. They understand that luck isn't something you hoard. It's something that multiplies when you share it. So they're constantly looking for ways to help other people, to connect people who might benefit from knowing each other, to share knowledge and opportunity. And because they're generous with their network and their knowledge, people are generous in return. opportunities flow back to them because they've built an entire ecosystem of reciprocal goodwill. Now here's the thing that's really important to understand. A luck master didn't wake up one day as a fully integrated person. They got there by doing the practices, by noticing opportunities, by trusting their intuition, by acting quickly, by building relationships, by interpreting failures as feedback, by aligning their goals with their values. They repeated these practices consistently until they became automatic. And that's how you get to level 3 too. It's not about being special or having some innate advantage. It's about consistent practice over time. Helen Hadsell was a level 3 luck master. She had integrated all of these skills so deeply that winning contests felt inevitable. She could walk into a situation and almost instantly sense the opportunities. She could move through obstacles without being derailed. She could build relationships that supported her work. She was aligned with her values around helping people and modeling possibility. And because all of this was integrated, her luck didn't feel like luck. It felt like the natural consequence of who she'd become. The challenge at this level is that most people never actually reach it. They get stuck at level 2. They do the work for a while, they build a network, they practice resilience, they get clear on their goals. And then something happens. They get comfortable, or they get tired, or they encounter a bigger obstacle than they've faced before, and they lose faith in the system. And they slide back. They stop practicing. And when they stop practicing, the integration starts to dissolve. The skills don't disappear. They're still there. But they become dormant. They stop being automatic. And luck stops feeling inevitable. This is why your practice at this level is different from the previous ones. This isn't about adding a new skill. This is about integrating everything you've learned so far into a daily practice that eventually becomes who you are. Here's your practice for level 3. The lucky person's daily practice. I want you to commit to a structured day that incorporates all 3 levels of luck. In the morning, before you start your day, spend 5 minutes in clarity. Reconnect with your values. Remind yourself of your aligned goals. Check in. Am I living in a way that's congruent with what matters to me? Is there anything today where I'm out of alignment? This isn't a long process. It's just 5 minutes of genuine internal honesty. Then throughout your day, practice noticing. This is the level 1 skill. When you're in conversations, when you're in meetings, when you're moving through your day, stay slightly alert to possibilities. What's someone saying that might be relevant to something you're working on? What patterns are you noticing? What could you be missing if you weren't paying attention? This becomes background awareness, not something you have to actively think about. When you encounter something that calls to you, an opportunity, a conversation starter, a risk you want to take, you trust your intuition and you move quickly. This is the level 2 skill. You don't overthink it. You follow the pull. And when something doesn't work out, when you encounter failure or rejection or disappointment, you immediately ask yourself the level 2 question. What does this teach me? What can I learn? How do I need to adjust? You treat it as feedback, not as judgment. And finally, throughout your day, you're intentionally generous. You're looking for ways to help other people. You're making connections. You're sharing knowledge. You're not doing this transactionally, not to get something back, but because you genuinely understand that generosity is how you build the kind of ecosystem where luck flows naturally. If you do this daily practice consistently, if you bring this integrated awareness to your days, what you'll find is that the skills start to become automatic. You'll stop having to think about whether you're trusting your intuition. You'll just naturally move on things that feel right. You'll stop having to remind yourself to build your network. You'll naturally be interested in people. You'll stop having to consciously reframe failures. You'll naturally be curious about what you can learn. And when that happens, when these skills become second nature, you'll find yourself living at level 3. You'll find yourself being someone for whom luck isn't something that occasionally happens to you. It's something you generate naturally as a byproduct of who you've become. But here's what most people don't understand about reaching mastery. There are still challenges ahead. Reaching level 3 doesn't mean your life becomes effortless. It means you become someone who moves through challenges with grace and resilience. But there's another layer to mastery that we haven't talked about yet. There's the question of what you do with your luck once you've mastered it. There's the question of legacy. There's the question of how you use your access and your opportunity in service of something bigger than yourself. And that's what the next chapter is about. Chapter 11. Level 3. Become a magnet for others' luck. The generosity principle. There's a paradox that most people who are pursuing luck never understand until they've lived it. The more you focus on luck as something that flows toward you, the more you're thinking about how to get yours, how to build your advantage, how to secure your position, the more you actually limit the luck that comes to you. But the moment you shift your focus to how you can create luck for other people, how you can open doors for others, how you can share what you've learned and what you have access to, that's when luck starts flowing toward you in ways that dwarf anything you could have created through pure self-interest. This isn't some mystical law of attraction thing. It's not about cosmic energy or karma or the universe rewarding your generosity. It's much more practical than that. It's about understanding how human networks actually work, how trust is built, how opportunities multiply, and how you position yourself in the center of a web of reciprocal goodwill that generates continuous opportunity. Think about what happens when you help someone. Maybe you introduce someone to another person who can genuinely help them. Maybe you share a piece of knowledge or a resource that saves them time or money, or helps them move forward on something important. Maybe you open a door that they couldn't have opened themselves. In that moment of generosity, something shifts in their perception of you. You're no longer just someone in their network. You're someone who actively creates value for them. And that perception, that sense that you're someone who generates opportunity, makes them think of you differently. They're more likely to return the favor when they can. They're more likely to recommend you. They're more likely to go out of their way to help you if you need it. But here's where it gets really interesting. The people you help often have networks of their own. And when they start talking about you, when they say, "There's this person who helped me with X, or who connected me with Y, or who showed me how to Z," they're essentially broadcasting your generosity throughout their network. And the people in their network start to perceive you as someone who creates opportunity. Even people you've never met start to see you that way, because someone who trusts you has vouched for you. And suddenly, opportunities start flowing from unexpected directions because you're known as someone who helps, someone who opens doors, someone who creates possibility for others. This is what most people miss when they're building their network at level 2. They're thinking transactionally, even if they don't realize it. They're building relationships because those relationships might eventually benefit them. They're generous because they're trying to create obligation. And people can sense that. There's a subtle inauthenticity that makes the generosity less effective. But when you've reached level 3, when you've done the deeper work of aligning with your values and integrating the skills of luck into who you are, your generosity becomes genuine. You help people because helping people matters to you. You create opportunities for others because you actually want them to succeed. And that authenticity changes everything. Let me give you an example of how this works in reality. Marcus had built a solid network through his work at level 2. He'd attended events, had conversations, maintained relationships. But he'd approached it all with an underlying question. How can this person help me? And his network was good, but it had limits. Then something shifted. Marcus realized that his real skill, the thing he was genuinely good at and that genuinely energized him, was connecting people. He was good at seeing how one person's skills could solve another person's problem. He was good at recognizing chemistry between people, and he started deliberately practicing that skill. Whenever he met someone, he wasn't just thinking, could this person help me? He was thinking, who do I know who this person should meet? How can I make a connection that would genuinely benefit them? And something remarkable happened. As Marcus started actively creating value for people through introductions and connections, his own opportunities exploded. The people he connected started thinking of him as a connector, as someone who creates value. They started introducing him to people. They started sending opportunities his way. Doors opened that he hadn't even been knocking on. But none of that happened because Marcus was calculating how to benefit. It happened because Marcus shifted his focus to genuinely helping others. And that authenticity created a completely different dynamic in his network. This is the secret that Helen Hadsell understood about luck that most people never get. She didn't just win contests for herself. She became known as someone who helped other people win. She shared her system. She encouraged people. She became invested in other people's success. And as she became known as someone who creates opportunity for others, more and more opportunities flowed toward her. Her generosity wasn't transactional. It was genuine. And it created an ecosystem where luck felt abundant rather than scarce. Here's what's really important to understand. When you become someone who creates luck for others, you become someone that luck naturally gravitates toward. This isn't because the universe is rewarding your goodness. It's because you've positioned yourself at the center of a network where value is constantly being created and shared. You're known as someone who helps. You're trusted. You're remembered. And when opportunities arise, people think of you because they know from experience that you're someone worth thinking of. The shift from level 2 to level 3 in terms of generosity is subtle but profound. At level 2, you might be generous strategically. You build relationships. You help people sometimes. You're looking at the long-term benefit of reciprocity. At level 3, generosity becomes intrinsic. It's not about what you might get back. It's about what you can genuinely contribute to the people and the community around you. And that intrinsic generosity is what creates the kind of luck that feels effortless and abundant. Now, there's something important I want to address here. If you're someone who spent a lot of time in people-pleasing mode, if you've been overly generous, if you've been saying yes when you wanted to say no, if you've been giving your energy away in ways that haven't served you, then this chapter might feel triggering. You might be thinking, wait, aren't you telling me to keep giving? And the answer is both yes and no. The generosity at level 3 is different from the generosity of people-pleasing. People-pleasing generosity comes from fear and a need to be liked. It's unsustainable because it's not authentic. Level 3 generosity comes from genuine interest and genuine alignment. It's sustainable because you're not giving at your own expense. You're contributing in ways that align with who you are and what you have to offer. Here's your practice for this level. I want you to commit to deliberately creating luck for one person per week. This isn't a huge time commitment. It's not about sacrificing yourself. It's about looking at your network and asking, who do I know who would genuinely benefit from knowing someone else in my network? Or who do I know who's working towards something where I could share a resource, a piece of knowledge, or an introduction that would accelerate their progress? And then you do it. You make the introduction. You share the resource. You offer the help. Not because you're calculating what you might get back, but because you can see a genuine way to create value. Do this consistently. Make one meaningful connection or offer genuine help to one person per week. As you do this, notice what happens. Notice how people respond. Notice how the dynamic in your network shifts. Notice how opportunities start flowing back to you. Sometimes from the people you directly helped, sometimes from people in their networks who heard about your generosity. And notice how it feels different from transactional networking. Notice the authenticity. Notice the genuine reciprocal goodwill that develops. What you're doing in this practice is training yourself to think like a level 3 luck master. You're building the habit of generosity that's intrinsic rather than instrumental. You're positioning yourself as someone who creates value. And as that becomes who you are, luck stops being something you pursue and starts being something that naturally flows toward you. But there's one more layer to mastery that we need to talk about. There's the question of what you build with all this luck. There's the question of whether you're just creating personal advantage or whether you're building something bigger, something that impacts others, something that creates lasting value, something that becomes a legacy. And that's what our final chapter is about. Chapter 12. Luck as a way of life, building your legacy. There's a moment that arrives in the life of someone who's genuinely mastered luck, and it's often unexpected. You've reached a point where opportunities are flowing. You've built a strong network. You're interpreting failures as feedback. You're aligned with your values. You're creating luck for others. And suddenly you wake up to a question that you might not have asked yourself in a long time. What is all of this for? What am I actually building with all this access and opportunity? Am I just accumulating more for myself? Or am I creating something that matters beyond my own success? This is where luck transforms from a skill that improves your personal life into a force that can create meaningful impact in the world. And this is where most people never go. They reach a level of external success and then they plateau. They have the opportunities, but they're not using them in service of anything bigger than themselves. And that plateau is actually a form of stagnation, even though it doesn't look like it from the outside. Helen Hadsell reached a point in her life where she could have just kept winning contests. She had the system. She had the skill. She could have accumulated more prizes, more money, more validation. But that's not what she did. Instead, she decided that her real purpose was to help other people understand that luck was trainable, that they too could become lucky. She started teaching. She started sharing her system. She started investing her time and her energy in helping others access the same opportunities that she'd accessed for herself. And in doing that, she created something that outlasted her personal success. She created a legacy. She created a body of knowledge that's still helping people today, decades after she first won those contests. This is what separates people who just get lucky from people who become architects of luck. People who use their understanding of how opportunity works to create structures and systems that generate opportunity for others. And when you reach that level, when you shift your focus from accumulating luck to creating luck, something profound shifts in your internal experience. You're no longer driven by scarcity or competition or fear that there isn't enough. You're operating from abundance. You're building something. You're contributing something that's bigger than you. Think about what you've learned through this entire journey. You've learned to notice opportunities. You've learned to trust your intuition and act on it quickly. You've learned to build relationships that matter. You've learned to interpret failure as information instead of identity. You've learned to align your goals with your values. You've learned to create opportunities for yourself and for others. All of these skills, all of this knowledge, what if you were to intentionally pass it on? What if you were to build something, a business, a community, a practice, a body of work that teaches others how to access the same kind of opportunity that you've learned to access? This doesn't mean you have to become a teacher in the formal sense. It doesn't mean you have to write a book or run seminars, unless that's what calls to you. But it does mean being intentional about how you're using what you've learned. It means thinking about the people coming up behind you, the people who are where you were 5 years ago, stuck and wondering if luck is real, and asking yourself how you can help them find their way to their own luck. It means building systems and mentoring relationships and ways of working that embody what you've learned. It means creating structures where opportunity can flourish. Here's what's remarkable about people who reach this level of maturity with luck. They're often more successful than they were before. Not because they're trying to be. They've actually shifted their focus away from personal success. But because they're operating in service of something bigger. Because they're creating value for others. Because they're building systems rather than just pursuing individual gain. They often end up with more success than they ever had when they were focused on accumulating it personally. It's the ultimate paradox of luck. Stop focusing on getting luck. Start focusing on creating luck for others, and your own luck multiplies beyond measure. There's also something deeper that happens at this level. Something psychological and spiritual that's hard to put into words, but profound to experience. When you're operating in service of something bigger than yourself, when you're genuinely invested in helping others succeed, when you're building something that will outlast your personal achievement, you stop feeling the anxiety that drives so much of the pursuit of success. You stop second-guessing yourself. You stop being afraid of failure because you're not as focused on proving something about yourself. You're focused on contributing something. And that shift in focus creates a kind of freedom and confidence that actually makes you more effective and more lucky. Think about the trajectory that luck has followed through this book. You started with learning to notice, expanding your perceptual field so you could see opportunities others miss. Then you learned to trust and act, to move quickly and commit to possibilities. Then you learned to create opportunities, to build networks and position yourself where luck was more likely to find you. Then you learned to navigate failure and align yourself with your values. Then you integrated all of those skills into a way of being where luck felt natural and effortless. And now you're at the point where you can take all of that skill and knowledge and use it in service of something that matters to you. Something that creates value beyond yourself. But here's what's important to understand. Reaching this level isn't the end of the journey. It's actually where the real journey begins. Because now, you're not just managing your own luck. You're responsible for how you use your access and your opportunity. You're making choices about what you build, about who you serve, about what legacy you're creating. And those choices matter. They matter to you, and they matter to the world. Here's your practice for this final level. I want you to get quiet with yourself and ask, what problem do I see in the world that I'm uniquely positioned to help solve? What do I know? What have I learned? Who do I have access to? What resources do I have? What could I build or create or contribute that would leverage all of that in service of something that matters? And then I want you to ask a second question. If I were to build something that creates opportunity for others, something that teaches them what I've learned, that helps them access luck in their own lives, what would that look like? What's the first small step I could take? You don't have to have the complete vision right now. You don't have to know exactly what it will look like or how it will unfold. You just need to identify the direction, the problem you want to help solve, the value you want to create, the people you want to serve. And then you take the first small step. You have all the skills you need to do this. You know how to notice opportunities. You know how to trust your intuition. You know how to move quickly. You know how to build relationships. You know how to interpret failure as feedback. You know how to stay aligned with your values. All you need to do now is point all of those skills in a direction that matters to you. Because here's the truth that the luckiest people understand. Luck isn't ultimately about you getting more stuff or achieving more status or accumulating more security. It's about you becoming more alive. It's about you operating at your full capacity, in service of something you genuinely care about, surrounded by people who matter to you, contributing something that makes a difference. And that kind of luck, that deep, fundamental luck that comes from living a life that's actually worth living, that's available to you. It's not reserved for special people. It's not determined by your circumstances or your past or what you missed. It's determined by who you decide to become and what you decide to build. So here's my final question for you, and I want you to sit with it. What would change in your life if you stopped thinking about luck as something that happens to you and started thinking about it as something you create? What would change if you stopped waiting for your moment and started building the conditions where moments are constantly arising? What would change if you committed, really committed, to the practices we've covered in this book? What would change if you decided that you were going to become someone for whom opportunity is the natural consequence of who you've become? The person who can answer those questions, the person who's willing to do the work to find out. That person is already on their way. That person is already becoming lucky. And all you have to do now is show up, pay attention, trust yourself, act with commitment, build real relationships, learn from your failures, stay aligned with what matters, and keep moving forward. That's it. That's the entire system. And it works. Your luck is waiting. Not in the future when circumstances have somehow magically aligned. Not when you feel more prepared or more confident or more certain. Conditions that will never fully arrive, no matter how long you wait. It's waiting right now. In the opportunities that are already surrounding you. In the relationships you could build, in the possibilities you could pursue if you were willing to see them and trust what you're seeing. So the choice is simple. See the opportunities. Trust what you're perceiving. Act on what calls to you. And then watch what becomes possible when you finally commit to becoming the kind of person that luck naturally gravitates toward. Your best years aren't behind you. They're waiting ahead. In the life you're about to build.